And to answer your question, I don't think she'll die. I'm just not feeling her. Maybe at the end of the season or end of second season, perhaps, but I think she's going to be around for a number of episodes. I mean, they'll be running out of characters otherwise, you know?
It's just Kara in the end, actually.
Right. Hello, Adison.
Hey, Billy. How you doing?
I'm feeling good. Another good episode of 1923. I'm all in on this show. Starting to figure out some of the layers of the show. I know the characters' names by now. Like I feel like I got a good handle on what's happening with this show.
I agree. This show, I actually, if you remember 1883, I begrudgingly was definitely dragging my feet every episode. It was just really hard for me to watch. This one, I'm really all in for it. And I also think that video that you had created of the Dutton family tree has significantly helped because, like I said, we have a lot of Johns, Jacobs, all the above, that it's Jack. It's been super helpful. I'm very much so. I think this episode was definitely one that was like, okay, I understand the lineage and how are things going around. And man, I love watching Helen Mirren act. I really hadn't watched her. I know she's played in, some action movies that I think Red is, if I'm remembering the movie that I've seen her in. So I really haven't seen too much of her. I'm really, really enjoying her.
She's been fantastic. And I will say, and this kind of teases something we're going to talk about in a little bit, no sooner did we drop the explanation of the Dutton family tree than we learned things where an edit may need to be made to the Dutton family tree. Like immediately we learned of a new Dutton. But I don't know if you caught it. You might have even missed it because it almost
Did you see my face?
Skipped right over. Yeah, I know. She's like, your eyebrow went up like The Rock.
Because I take notes over here. And I was like, Adison, how did you miss that? Okay, well, we're going to, I need to hear that because I admit, I don't think I caught on to that. But before we get into all of that, my favorite, well, now that's become my favorite because it's become the affirmation show. Billy, what was our trivia from last week? And who got it correct?
All right. staff@tasteofcountry.com is the email address. And a quick note, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, to leave a rating and review. We'd really appreciate it. We appreciate the feedback, positive and negative, and we've used it to help shape the show over the year plus that we've been doing this. But last week's trivia question was this. The actors who played Jamie Dutton and Malcolm Beck on Yellowstone and Alexandra on 1923 all have this running television show in common. It's a long-running TV show. Which show is it? Do you know?
No.
There are certain shows that Taylor Sheridan seems to cherry pick from, and the biggest is American Horror Story, that long-running show on...
Interesting.
Is it on FX? I think it's on FX.
Billy, I've never seen it, so I cannot help you there.
I admit I've never watched it either, but I really wanted to, especially when it first came on. Two reasons I didn't. One is because I don't have cable, but also, as I've alluded to, my wife just gets terrified when anything scary happens. So
that's a no-go in your household.
Wouldn't let us, but several correct answers. But the first one in, and she's been a regular listener to this show for a long time, is Renee. Renee, it's still early in the year, Renee. If you've had a couple of blows the first week of the year, if you're feeling down in the dumps, maybe your plans for your New Year's resolution aren't going well. Now is the time to pivot, Renee. There is still time for 2023 to be the year of Renee, but you take it one day at a time. Today, be the best Renee you can be and make good decisions, and then tomorrow you repeat it. And that's how you're going to win this world, girl. Get it!
Absolutely. As I told my friends last week, you know what, Billy? I feel like last week was syllabus week in college where, you're back from the holidays. It's the first week of the new year. It's just syllabus week. So, Renee, this is actually coined by myself. This is actually the first week of the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? You can make resolutions any time of the year, Renee.
Exactly.
January 9th, February 23rd, March 14th. That all good days for change.
Billy, I think that was actually a little bit of a pep talk for ourselves over here's what that became.
A little bit. It felt like maybe you needed something.
I did, yeah. I I took that and ran with it. Thanks, Renee, for the right answer in the pep talk. Billy, what is this week's trivia? Last week I was guns blazing. I forgot that we had to, intro the new trivia. So what is this week's trivia?
Assuming that Kevin Costner's character's father is the son of Jack Dutton and Elizabeth. Jack Dutton and Elizabeth are the young couple in 1923. How is Tate Dutton related to James Dutton? It's a family tree question.
Sorry. Yeah, it is a family tree question, and I am looking like a deer in the headlights right now, Billy. As I'm just trying to mentally remember that.
I'll give you a big clue. If you go to tasteofcountry.com, we did a post on it that includes a graphic that literally has the family tree laid out, and you can just count father, grandfather, blah, 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 blah. First person in, staff at tasteofcountry.com. You can get your very own pep talk next week.
All right, Billy, are we ready to dive in to episode 4 of 1923?
I have a question for you about episode 4.
Ooh, okay. Go for it. I'm ready, potentially.
Who is this show about? Who is the main character of 1923?
I'd say the main character, I feel like, is Kara right now. I feel like some people are probably going to differ because when I read articles, I feel like people think Spencer, but I think Kara, especially after this last episode. She's taking on the Dutton family, right? She's taking on the Dutton family, but also just manning the ranch right now with the help, obviously, of everyone else. But she's a leader.
Yeah. Well, if we learned anything from 1883 is that we would have episodes that would be dedicated towards sort of explaining or spotlighting certain characters. We would have a Margaret episode and a James episode and a Thomas episode. But I think the other thing we learned from 1883, we all thought James and Margaret were the main characters of that show, played by Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, when in reality, I think stepping back, Elsa was probably the main character.
Absolutely.
Isabel May's character. So I agree with you that after episode 4, Kara is the main character, but I'm not so sure that this isn't going to be Spencer's show at the end of the day.
I do agree with you. I was hesitating because anytime I say that, I feel like I end up being wrong. I could see where that ends up going. I will say this specific episode, obviously, like you just said, Kara was definitely the leader in that. I don't know about you, Billy, other than just showing that Alex and Spencer were frolicking and having, the time of their lives as, quite literally the Dutton family is crumbling over, not in Africa. I think what was interesting is that I didn't feel as if really a lot of the scenes with Alex and Spencer this episode were needed. I mean, honestly, there were some scenes I just kept fast forwarding because I was like, we are still here. Okay, we are still here. Get me to the goods. I'm being honest.
Aw, I mean, you fast forwarded through like the good-looking couple love scenes.
No, I love them, but just like the beach when we are on the beach for a good 15 minutes into the show. Right. Okay, 15 is probably dramatic, but I'd say a good 10. And I'm going, all right. Are we leaving the beach anytime soon? I'm happy for them. I need to get to the action a little bit sooner.
Can we stop for a second and explore what Alex has packed for this trip, this impromptu trip? She just threw a bag in the back of Spencer's car, but in that bag, she has basically everything she needs for a safari, as well as not one, but at least 2 and maybe even 3 different sets of lingerie that we've seen in the first several days. Like the girl, was prepared for some. She knew what she was getting herself into. Is all I'm saying.
Funny that you said that because I also was genuinely chuckling. I was watching it by myself and I was chuckling as I saw those scenes of like, this is real convenient. And then I will say it did, after I, chuckled, then I did think, okay, wait, she technically didn't pack for this gallivant with Spencer. When we saw the scene of her throwing her bag into the car, she was getting on, I think it was a bus to go. We don't know where she was going, but pretty much that's when she ditched her fiance, ditched her world essentially, and jumped in the car with him. So obviously she was packing for whatever trip she was going on there. But before I remembered that moment, I did chuckle where I was like, interesting articles of clothing to just spontaneously have.
Yeah. She's not. I hope she threw a jacket in there because at some point that trip back to the United States, they can stop and maybe pick up a coat in London before they ship off across the Atlantic.
Yeah, at
Or else
some
she's going
point
to be shivering.
those silk pajamas aren't going to get her very far.
No, they're not. Let's stay with them in a second, because I thought we learned a lot about Spencer in this episode as well. And an important timeline to understand is that World War I ended in 1918, end of 1918. So it's really been 4.5 years where Spencer's sort of been traveling around Africa, working and trying to get past his demons. So he's been struggling with things for a long, long time. And apparently he's kept all of his aunt's letters and never read any of them. And this led to what I thought was the biggest revelation from episode 4, is that the Alex and Spencer timeline is not the same as the Dutton family ranch timeline. Like, they've been operating in a future world.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And that, I understand why that needed to be. I thought it was a little bit of a trick that I didn't love. But it explains how they're going to come back. And I think it kind of sets up what we're going to see in episode 5 in 1 month from now.
I totally agree. And I also agree that, I felt a little tricked in the sense of it happens at the end of the episode. And so, you finish the episode and I'm questioning everything that just happened, with Jack, Elizabeth, and all them. And because I realized, oh, shoot, this is not real life. So Jacob could be dead at this point. You know what I mean? There's so many things that I'm going, okay, wait, I wasn't coming in from that lens, I guess, of view. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that they decided, okay, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to end it saying that this was 3 months, or they didn't say it, but when Alex, or when Spencer asked, what's the date on that letter that she was reading about, that we saw at the end of episode 3 of Kara writing, hey, when you get this, your brother's dead. Most likely your uncle is as well.
Right.
Yeah, that it was. Well, and what's interesting is, if you remember what I said on last episode, that the journey back home was going to take probably him several weeks, if not months. And so if this is already 3 months when he's just now reading this letter, it's going to be a hot minute for him to get back.
So my thinking is this. We have this 1 month break between episode 4 and 5. Episode 5 of 1923 comes on February 5th. And then I believe we have 3 more episodes after that to wrap up the first season of this show. They've confirmed that there is going to be something like a second season coming soon. I think when episode 5 begins, it's going to be about a 6-month time jump in the Yellowstone, or in the 1923 ranch world. So that will put Spencer on the way home, but it'll get us through a lot of sort of attacks on the Dutton family. Like, they would have been dealing with Banner for quite a while now, and his plan to take over the ranch will have developed. But it's also going to give Jacob Dutton a little bit of time to recover to some extent, because it does seem like he's going to recover. Would you agree?
The reason why I think so is not actually because of the scenes that we've seen. It's been more so our conversations that we've had, in interviews of him that we've heard of him saying, I'm really excited for, all these episodes, all the above.
Right.
And, as it sounds like there's a continuation for his character in general. That's more so what I'm leaning my thoughts and theories on. Yeah, I don't know if I think I'm just kind of sitting on the fence in the scenes that we saw from episode 4 of, will he actually make it?
Okay.
But I did love, just sticking on before we move on, just the specifically Spencer and Elsa from 1883, they're siblings. And as we've seen, we've seen her represented in 1923 as, this narrator. And I know you really like the way that she poetically kind of sets the scenes for a lot of what's happening. And what I love is that Taylor in this episode kind of had Spencer kind of take the similar note of kind of Elsa's poetry. And he said the line when he was talking about the war and opening up to Alex, and he had said, and I literally wrote it down, it said, if insanity were a thing you could touch. And I just thought that was a really cool moment for me personally to kind of see that parallel of siblings, and that he kind of shares the same just eloquency in language, but obviously Elsa's normally the one who's taking that on in 1923. It's something small, but just something I kind of noted.
I thought there were some great quotable lines in this episode, from Tiona telling Sister Mary, "I am the land and I am killing you."
Yeah.
That was bone chilling. Cara Dutton had that line about I kill much slower to Banner. I mean, that was a really effective line. I'd like to kind of draw, and we've got a couple of emails. Big thanks to everybody who emailed this week, because there was a lot of great emails that got me thinking. But someone mentioned drawing parallels between Yellowstone and 1923. And I think you can kind of look at the characters. Like, to me, Spencer is Casey. Like, they both fought in a war. They both needed to come home to save the ranch. They both have this outsider kind of wife and resisted the ranch life to a certain extent.
Right.
So if that's true, Elsa could be Lee Dutton. Lee Dutton died in episode 1 of Yellowstone. They're both the oldest children and both die. That would make John Sr. Beth Dutton, kind of, in a way. But that doesn't bode well for Beth. A bit of a stretch, I think.
No. I think that was a little bit of a stretch, but I do like your first two theories.
It is. They're not on brand. They're not totally direct comparisons, but I think that we do start to see some similarities between the show. I mean, Jacob Dutton was shot and left for dead. John Dutton, Kevin Costner's character, was shot and left for dead. Like, we're starting to kind of see how history is repeating itself at the very least.
Well, and kind of speaking to Jacob being shot, can you set up the scene? Darn old Banner comes back. Have a bone to pick with him for obvious reasons. Kind of set up the scene that was pretty. I feel like that was a pretty big point to touch on in this episode of 1923.
Which scene? Which with Banner?
When he was the funding from the
Gotcha. Yeah.
The dude that I cannot not remember his name at this moment.
Well, I don't know if it's ever said during the episode, but the character's name is Donald Whitfield. So Banner decides that he needs an army to help fight the Duttons and to basically take over their land. And he doesn't have the manpower and he doesn't have the money. So he goes to this rich man named Donald Whitfield, who's some sort of land baron or something of those sorts. It's not clear what his position is. Donald Whitfield, by the way, is played by Timothy Dalton, who was once James Bond. So it's kind of interesting.
Love that.
And Donald Whitfield agrees to give him the money to form an army, and they strike a deal together. It doesn't seem like this new guy loves working with Banner, but he understands that Banner can help him get what he wants, which is to essentially own the whole valley and to make a lot of money off of this land, sell the mineral rights and such. What we're seeing with Donald Whitfield, who could end up being like one of the series' or this franchise's all-time great villains, he is also going to buy the Stratford Ranch. The Stratfords are Elizabeth Stratford, who's marrying Jack, her family's ranch, because in the trailer, the very first sequence of the trailer, we see him say that he has acquired the Stratford Ranch, and we now know why that's the case. That means they're next door neighbors with the Duttons. So he's kind of playing that angle while he's funding these attacks on the Duttons. So I think his character, while we've just seen him in short glimpses and been introduced to him, I think he's going to be a major, major character through at least the rest of this first season of the show.
I liked in this episode where, like we've said earlier in the podcast, where Kara's definitely the leader, at least as of right now. Like we said, it could end up being kind of Spencer being the main character. And when they were talking about what I liked seeing this was kind of the birth of the livestock agent, and seeing, we see in Yellowstone, Casey being a part of that and all the above, and just kind of wondering, okay, where and when did that start? And that's what we saw from this past episode, which I think I like seeing kind of the connecting of the dots of, okay, this is when this started. And now I kind of understand. And I think that was one of those moments for me.
I'm curious to know how the actual Montana Livestock Agency formed. Like, if there's any parallels to the truth there, because she essentially forges her husband's signature to get people to vote in favor of this, what will become the Livestock Agency, a police force for the cattle, and rams that through pretty effectively. Like, how did it actually happen? But what we're seeing from Kara is she's taking lead, but also having these emotional moments and these insecure moments where she'll run outside into a field and just sort of vent all of her frustrations and emotions quickly and powerfully into the air, and then take a deep breath and get back to the hard, dirty work at hand. she's really good. I mean, she's a really good character, and of course, Helen Mirren is a tremendous actress, but it's really good acting.
No, absolutely. Oh, I felt that screaming scene in my bones. I was like,
yeah, but then just the way that she lets it out, but then
composes and
it's done.
And it's
like
you feel it and you move on. All right.
Damn, woman. She's cleaning up the blood of her husband. I mean, good gosh.
Do you think this might be a little bit of a hot take? And I'm also curious because this is where I kind of got lost. The Elizabeth and Jack scene where Kara goes in to make sure, she wants to check on Elizabeth and see how her gunshot wound is doing. Do you think for whatever reason, because we left her off right now that she's having a fever and her mom comes and says, I'm taking you back to where we're from, East Coast, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And says, to get you to an actual hospital. And Elizabeth says, no, I'm going to stay with Jack. Do you think that choice will then end up her dying? And also, I was a little confused when her mom said, after, I don't remember the context, but pretty much just said, your dad's also dead. I don't remember why she said that, but it struck a note in my head of like, wait, I don't remember this. And I'm a little confused.
I totally missed it as well. And we didn't really figure it out until Kara is at the Livestock Association meeting. Remember when the cattle thieves, Banner leads the cattle thieves since they steal the cattle, but they also kill a number of men?
Mm-hmm.
Bob Stratford, Elizabeth's father, was one of those men that got killed.
Gotcha.
Kara announces that at the association meeting, and that's how she gets all the votes, is by announcing that he was one of the ones who was killed during that attack. So that explains, I think, also why Elizabeth's mother was so upset. Not only did her daughter get shot fooling around with these Duttons, but her husband got killed.
Yeah.
And of course, now Mrs. Stratford is going to need to sell that ranch, which is how Donald Whitfield will ultimately acquire it. But long story short there, Elizabeth has chosen to stay with Jack at the Dutton Ranch. And to answer your question, I don't think she'll die.
Okay.
I think she'll survive. She's been I'm just not feeling her. Maybe at the end of the season or end of second season, perhaps, but I think she's going to be around for a number of episodes. I mean, they'll be running out of characters otherwise,
It's just Kara in the end, actually.
Right. Kara and Zane or something.
Do we want to, we're kind of pivoting from, or I might just pivot right now from a little bit lighthearted to every time this character comes on the screen, it's such powerful TV, but it's also really, really heavy. And I kind of end up always letting a deep sigh. You probably know who I'm talking about. Do we want to pivot to Tiona?
Yep. Yeah, let's pivot and talk about that sequence. And then I want to mention one more thing with regards to the letters that Alex and Spencer read.
Yes. I mean, I literally that was also a deep sigh as I was trying to pivot to Tiona. Billy, this was, I don't know about you watching this, but that entire scene, and also the fact that she ended up killing someone. I didn't see coming, and in general, that was just, I think I might need you to, I need you to set the scene up.
Well, I think of all the scenes that people might want to fast forward through, it's these scenes. And literally, my wife will leave the room during these. Anytime they go to the Indian boarding school, my wife just is like, all right, tell me what happens. But there's another fight. Tiona, the Native American at the school, she defends her best friend who is getting whipped with the ruler. Mm-hmm. And there's another fight. And then Tiona ends up being pretty brutally tortured. They cut her hair off, and then they scrub her back with I think is like a steel wool pad and really bloody her. Mm-hmm. So that night she decides enough is enough, and she draws on the war paint, and she collects all the Bibles in a pillowcase and then sneaks into Sister Mary's room and symbolically bludgeons her to death and then chokes her. And that's where she utters the line, "I am the land and I am killing you." Then after she's dead, she takes the woman's ruler and heats it up and sort of scars her with the ruler, and presumably leaves after that. She goes out into the wind. I've had a hard time, kind of like we mentioned several times, we do these recap videos, and it's like, I don't know how to place this part of the action in these recap videos that are otherwise pretty good natured and fun.
Right.
And really fast paced. So the best thing I can say is we did a whole video kind of explaining the realities of this suffering from the natives. Kind of start there and do some of your own research. But all of this is, I think, based on some truth. And now I think we're starting to see how Tiona's character might eventually intersect with someone from the Dutton family.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what, aside from them being really heavy scenes, I've kind of, at least for me, have struggled understanding where this scene is, like, how does this fit into the bigger picture? Where the other scenes in 1923, I can eventually get there. I think this character, I have a harder time understanding. Like, I don't feel like there's been a really clear-cut avenue of, like, this is how she's going to set up the future.
What's interesting to me is this first interaction. I think we'll get an interaction between Tiona and a Dutton family member. And I'm wondering if it's going to be a positive interaction or a negative interaction. Like, what sort of sets the mood for everything that follows. And I think we'll find that out in the next few episodes.
Staff at tasteofcountry.com, if you have thoughts on anything that we've shared so far, comments, corrections, that's where you can find us.
I had mentioned the family tree at the beginning of talking, and an addition in the family tree. But one of the early letters that Alex read to Spencer talks about someone, and I believe they were referring to John Sr. and his wife, losing a baby.
Yes.
At some point.
This is how you're full circling we found out a Dutton that we didn't know about.
Well, now I'm not sure if they lost the baby, if they had a miscarriage, or if there was a birth and the baby just didn't survive. That's not really ever made clear, but it is clear there's some more suffering. And, a curious thing for me is if Kara and Jacob ever had kids. Like, I think at some point they've said we don't have kids, but I also, in my family tree, I have marked as having had 2 kids that died young at the ranch, because we know there are 2 boys out there that died at some point along the way. And it seems like they could only come from Kara and Jacob, but that is somewhat speculation. And they've never outright said they never had any children. But so much child loss back then. It seemed to be certainly a way of life, reality of life.
Is there anything, Billy, that I have not touched on that you're just itching to talk about that I might have missed?
Some Q&A?
Yeah, I'm ready for Q&A if you are.
Let's do it.
Alrighty, this is always one of my favorite parts. Here we go. The first one is from Joe saying, I'm wondering what happened to the fact that Beth discovered that Sarah Atwood is not her real name. Seems like that angle just died with the discovery. Is there any theories as to how that may come into play in the second half? Which, Joe, thank you for bringing that up, because I've mentioned that before, but I still think about that from time to time. That was a great plot point that I was really excited to see develop, and we have not developed that theory at all.
No, not at all. And it is a little frustrating, because it did seem like that was how Beth was going to undo Sarah Atwood. And by the way, a lot of the questions we got and responses, and there were a ton of them, had to do with Yellowstone this week, which makes sense because obviously episode 4 of 1923 is just fresh. They have to close that loophole somehow, some way. They can't just leave it that Sarah Atwood's not her real name. Who is this woman? Like, who this woman really is has to be flushed out at some point during the second half of season 5. Otherwise, it would just be like kind of it'd be the biggest loophole in Yellowstone. It'd be bigger than the Lugnut Boy's fate, I think, from season 3. And I always kind of go back to him, but
as we always
has
do.
to happen.
Yeah.
But I don't have an explanation or a theory based on that, but I know a lot of listeners do, including, I think it leads into this next email that you're going to read, and this theory, which is kind of popular.
This next one is from Andrew, who says, here's the twist. Jamie and Beth have made up, and they're setting up Jamie's girlfriend and Markwood Equities to set up the murder for hire. Jamie becomes governor. Beth and John short Market Equities stock, which allows them to keep the ranch after a tape is released of the murder for hire. The ranch is bequeathed to Tate and John Dutton IV. That was a deep one.
Well, a lot of people have kicked around this idea that somehow Jamie, Beth, and John Dutton are all in cahoots, or maybe Jamie and John are in cahoots, or somehow there's some sort of partnership that happened away from the cameras. And while that seems like that would be a really cool twist, I just have never ever seen anything with Yellowstone that indicates that that's the kind of writing they go for. That's very Ocean's 11, isn't it? Like the aha moment where you realize Danny Ocean is he's in the air vents going down into the safe. Like, we've never gotten that kind of writing in a Taylor Sheridan drama. It's usually much more straightforward, especially on Yellowstone. What you see is what you get. I don't think Jamie and Beth are making up. If Jamie ends up kind of helping and maybe working with John, perhaps, but while I like the idea, I struggled with that being the way that the ranch gets to Tate.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't think Jamie and Beth are making up any time soon, unfortunately. Alrighty, the last one I have for us is from Carrie, who says, just putting this out there for you to ponder. Jack is actually a nickname for John. I think he might be John the Second.
Yeah, but Jack is also you can be just a Jack too. His nickname could be Jack, because the late John Sr., he would be John the Second, which would make Dabney Coleman's character John the Third and Kevin Costner's character John the Fourth. We've never seen any of those numerologies used, which is why I always say there's two John Seniors. So we don't know the truth there, but it could be a 1, 2, 3, 4 type situation. I get really confused when it comes to like what makes someone a junior and what makes someone a second and a third. Like, I started going down that rabbit hole once, and that was where I knew I needed to sort of pump the brakes and maybe check in on how my family and my kids are doing.
Pull up, Billy.
yeah, a little bit. But if you, again, like I said earlier, the full family tree is at tasteofcountry.com if you want to kind of explore that for yourself. And I actually have one more email as well, Adison.
Oh, go for it. You surprised me on that one. Okay.
Yeah, well, we got a ton of great emails this week. I want to thank Amy for her email. It was really thoughtful and laid out. And Marcia is a big fan of your blonde theory. Adison.
Oh, Marcia. Tell me more, Billy. Tell me more.
This is the theory that Jamie's going to put the hit on Beth, but because Summer, who's also a blonde, is living at the house, the hitman's going to get the wrong blonde and kill Summer. And she says, totally nailed it. Summer's days are numbered. I won't miss her. But that's not the way I'd have her go away. I would just have her go away. Love your podcasts. Marcia, a lot of love for the show.
You.
And, we're all a big fan of that theory. I think that to me is a very plausible way for how this wraps up with Jamie kind of getting whacked in the end.
Man, I really hope it is, because I'm here for that theory. Not just because I'm the one who said it, but more so just because I just really like that theory. And it gets me off the Beth and Jamie never making up. So that's kind of the only way to kind of pivot that not happening.
Staff at tasteofcountry.com. If you are new to the podcast, please tap follow, and a rating and review would really be helpful. You can follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcast platform happens to be.
And truly thank you for everyone who's listening, for tuning in, giving us rating reviews, emailing us. Billy and I so greatly appreciate it. And it's something that definitely we've enjoyed getting to talk about here. It's been fun covering all of Taylor Sheridan's entities. Billy, can we, before we peace out for this episode, can we kind of fill listeners in of what they can expect? I know we have kind of a hot minute before the next 1923 episode recap. So what can fans and listeners expect from us podcast-wise?
We're going to keep coming weekly. We'll bring Sterling Whitaker back in either on Thursday or next Monday for sort of a review and a grading of the first half of the Yellowstone podcast. And then Sterling also has some really good information on why Kevin Costner might or might not be leaving the show.
Yeah.
And what that would look like. And then from there, as the information becomes available, we'll maybe do some short burst podcasts that explain some of the new news within the Taylor Sheridan universe for Six's Ranch, 1923, and some of these other spinoffs that have been discussed as being possible.
Well, I'm Adison Haager, and that was Billy Dukes. Thanks for always joining us here on this podcast. It's fun getting to chat all things 1923. And as always, Dutton Rules, a Yellowstone 1923 podcast, is another classy Town Square Media podcast.
Classy, I like it.
Classy and sassy.
See ya.